right, everybody, welcome to SeraphShares. Anyway, if this is your first time at SeraphShares, fret not. SeraphShares is all about sharing wisdom with each other. I'm fairly young, and people my age tend to naturally just make a lot of mistakes. You know, you have to learn from your mistakes, and when you get to my age, you just make tons of mistakes. It's just kind of how the world works, but it's fine. It's all right. What that means, that I'm making a lot of mistakes, is that I'm also learning a lot, as long as I'm like learning from my mistakes and not just repeating my mistakes. That's a conversation for another time, but I'm learning from my mistakes usually. So as I'm learning, my goal is to share that with you guys, because wisdom is best when it's shared with others. So I'll have a short 10-minute story or whatever about what I've been learning and why I've been learning it. And then after that, I ask you guys what you learned this week. That's new in SeraphShares. Before, I would just talk and then that'd be the end of it. But now I'm going to ask you guys what you learned that week. So I mentioned before that last week when I announced the relaunch that I might do some sort of retrospective on some things that I haven't really talked about because SeraphShares hasn't been going on. But this is going to be a little retrospective because it pertains to a situation that has been ongoing over that period of time where there was no SeraphShares. But it's something I realized more recently, I think. So the idea of harnessing hesitance is what I want to share with you guys tonight. But before we do that, we're going to define a couple things. We're going to compare hesitance to patience. And we're going to look at the definitions of those two things. So first of all, patience. What is patience? It is defined as the capacity to accept or tolerate delay, trouble, or suffering without getting angry or upset. Whereas hesitance is a feeling of diffidence and indecision about doing something. So, what's diffidence? Because I didn't know what that meant, so I looked up diffidence too. So, diffidence is modesty or shyness resulting from a lack of self-confidence. So if you think about it, patience and hesitance are very similar. They kind of mean the same thing, just with a different connotation. And they're also different in the way that they're used. So patience has a positive connotation, right? Patience is a virtue. It's a positive thing. It's generally considered a good trait. And it's intentional, right? You consciously choose to be patient. Whereas with hesitance, it just kind of happens without you having to think about it. And then hesitance also has a negative connotation. You know, I could have finished my math test if I hadn't have hesitated so much on that one problem that was tripping me up. Negative. So at the same time, both patience and hesitance have the same result. What is that result? The result of them both is not acting right away. Sometimes that's a good thing, but sometimes it's a bad thing. Another thing to consider about hesitance and patience is opportunity. So hesitance is almost always in a state of opportunity. You're suddenly faced with an opportunity to make a decision, but you unintentionally hesitate and you don't decide right away. Whereas with patience, it might have opportunity, it might not. So you can actively choose patience when you have opportunity that doesn't demand a choice right away. You can also choose patience when there is a lack of opportunity, in which case you're choosing patience so that you won't be anxious, because normally it's a situation where you would love to do something about it, but you just literally cannot for whatever reason. So there's a lack of opportunity, and you choose patience so that you're not anxious about the fact that you can't do anything about it. So in both cases, though, both with hesitance and with patience, you carefully consider your options, whether or not opportunity is available. Oftentimes, I will beat myself up because I'm far too hesitant. I really am. And most of that comes from the fact that lots of times I don't feel like I know what I'm doing. And, you know, we're getting better with that as well. You know, all a learning process. But it's usually the lack of self-confidence part from that diffidence definition that gets me. I'm always just not confident with myself for whatever reason. But the more I started to see how hesitant I was, the more I ask myself why, why am I like this, right? And in doing that, I begin to see the other side of hesitance, which is patience. And patience is something that I don't really struggle much with. I don't mind waiting in lines or sitting in traffic or waiting for an awesome game to come out or anything like that. I don't have a problem waiting, which is great because, I think a lot of people nowadays struggle with patience. So personally, I thank God for giving me a natural tendency to be patient. But in realizing all the benefits of being patient, I began to use that knowledge to analyze my hesitance. So instead of seeing all the bad that comes from my hesitance, I started seeing the good. So for instance, if somebody curses you out or flips you off or just rubs you the wrong way, a natural response would be to fire back at them in some way, maybe with an insult or just returning whatever it is that they did back right at them. It's just a natural thing to do most of the time. But for me, I almost never do that. Granted, the times that I've been flipped off or cursed out have been few and far between, but that's not the point. The point is, when somebody rubs me the wrong way or something like that or makes me mad, my initial response is rarely to fire back at them. And the reason for that is because it's my hesitance. But I always think before I act because I hesitate. Is this a good thing to do? My initial feeling might be to fire back at them, but I look at that initial feeling and I go, that's not great. Let's do something else. Right? So in a lot of cases, well, okay, I don't know, maybe not a lot, but in some cases, hesitance is another great trait to have. So do I still have some work to do as far as being hesitant? Yeah, because ultimately it's not always great. It's not always a great thing. Sometimes I hesitate about things that I shouldn't hesitate about. And that, that's a SeraphShares for another time. But there's definitely a lot of room for me to improve on being hesitant. But the more good I see in this area of my character, the easier it is to handle the bad portion of my hesitance. Because suddenly the good caused by my hesitance, it outweighs the bad almost, because I'm looking at all the good that it causes, and I don't think about the bad. It's not that I'm ignoring the bad, but it feels like less of an issue. So from before, it seemed like a huge issue with me. I was like, I'm always going to be this way. This sucks. I wish I wasn't so hesitant. But now I see it's not always a bad thing. So that helps me mentally, just thinking about it. And it seems like not as big an issue. So, I feel more ready to tackle it and get better at it. It's definitely an issue still worth working at, but it's often easier to tackle things when they don't feel like insurmountable obstacles that you're just never going to be able to change. So I would challenge you guys to look at something that you don't like about yourself, and see if there's another side to it that is actually a positive thing. If you're already thinking about something, share it in the comments or in the chat if you're here watching live. But if not, maybe something to think about. And now, of course, the new tradition of SeraphShares. If you guys learned something this week, it doesn't have to be anything related to what I just talked about, but if you guys learned something this week about yourself or just in general, share it in the chat or in the comments or whatever. Share it with other people, because wisdom is best when it's shared. So that is going to wrap it up for SeraphShares this week. Harnessing Hesitance. I don't know if all the SeraphShares for season 2 are going to be, what's the word? Crap, I should know this. Alliteration? Not alliteration. Alliterative? Is that a word? I have no idea. Guys, help me. I don't know if they're all going to be alliterative, but this one was. It's got a nice ring to it. Harnessing Hesitance. Hope you guys liked it. Hope you learned something. Because I know I did.